Yo, what it do, YouTube? It's your boy MaxThePrime. Today we're gonna be reacting to 3 True Horror Stories animated, Ding Dong Ditch, Arcade, and The Van. Let's check this out.
My name is Isaac. I'm from Australia, and this is a scary story I'd like to tell you. One day when I was in my early teens, a friend came over for a sleepover during school holidays. We decided to do some ding-dong ditching, which is going up to houses and knocking on the door or ringing the doorbell and then running off for hiding, since that's what kids our age got up to back then. After ding-dong ditching a few houses, we came up to an old, shabby-looking house at the top of a small hill. There was a driveway leading up to the house with a gray patrol SUV out front. Of course, it was my turn to go, so I walked up and looked for the door. Keep in mind, there were a lot of bushes out front, so I had to search for the door. I went on one side in front of the car and looked, but it turned out to be the side gate, which was open. I wasn't a real bad kid, so I didn't go in at all. But right as I turned
Smart move.
around to go back down the driveway, a red, old and sporty car pulled up and drove up the driveway and saw me. The person driving it was about 20 or so, and in the passenger seat was a girl who was about the same age. Of course, he immediately got out of his car and walked up to me and started asking what I was doing and yelling at me. I was getting scared, thinking he was going to beat me up. I looked for my friend, but I saw him running away. I told him what we were
You should have done the same thing.
doing and that I meant no harm, and he let me off with a warning. But this isn't where the story ends. A different day, maybe about a week later, I was riding my bike down near a park when I saw the red car again. I rode right past it, so I knew they saw me too. I rode away as fast as I could, but it chased me. I eventually got to the end of the road and went onto a path that led to a big loop around the lake that would lead back to the main road. While I was riding around the loop, I looked across the lake and saw the car sitting there, waiting for me at the exit. I panicked and quickly looked in the bushes and found a path made by other bike riders, so I went down there. I ended up getting home safely and didn't tell my parents. But later that evening, things took a turn for the worse. I was sitting in my room playing video games when all of a sudden I heard the loud engine of the car as it was pulling into our driveway. I quickly ran to the front door and looked through the front gate, and I saw the driver get out of the car. It was the same person who I saw at the park, and the passenger wasn't the girl.
Wait, hold up. How does he know where you live?
This time it was another guy who looked about the same age as the other. I told my parents to come out, and when they saw them, my mom called the cops. There was a gate in front of the door at my house, which we were looking at them through, and they walked right up to it. To my surprise, one of the men took out a metal pipe and started hitting the gate with full force. I screamed and locked the door. After 1 minute of continuous hitting, we heard the gate fly open. The only thing left for them to break before getting in was the old wooden door, which could be opened with just a kick. Just then, we heard police sirens and people yelling. After
It's good that they called the police.
it all died down, we came out and saw the 2 men being arrested, and the look he gave me sent chills down my body. We later found out that the men were on drugs, and the driver had a gun and was planning to kill me. I've never been ding-dong ditching since.
Lesson learned, you guys. Don't ever play Ding Dong Ditch.
This is a story about an incident that I caused when I was a reckless teenager, and because of it, I still carry a terrible trauma with me. If I hadn't acted so foolishly back then, my life would have gone smoothly. I cannot help but recall that nightmare-like incident, even if I don't want to keep reliving it. It must have been about 15 years ago. I was around 17. At that time, my routine after school was to go to the arcade with my friends. On the day of the incident, I was happily playing a game called Tekken with my friends at the arcade, but there was also a man in his 30s playing the same game. I ended up competing with him at Tekken. At that time, I was known to be very good at Tekken. There was no one in the neighborhood who could beat me. As expected, the man was completely defeated by me, and I could see him gritting his teeth in anger. He kept challenging me, and I kept winning. Then, he suddenly started to bang his fists on the monitor and roared. Then he yelled at me.
Do you want to fight me in real life instead of playing a game?
But I burst out laughing. because he was clearly a big man in his 30s, but his voice sounded like a child's. Then he suddenly grabbed me by the collar, as if he was more angry at my laughter. I was flustered by his aggression, and my friends who were watching started trying to stop him. Then, the man's expression
Yo, he really got mad over a game.
suddenly became very stern, and the sound of his voice did a 180. He said in a very deep, rumbling, low voice,
"Are you the one who made Max mad?"
I swallowed hard, confused by the sudden change in his demeanor. At that moment, I thought this man was mentally ill, and I had a gut feeling that something was wrong. I was scared because he was a big man. When I apologized, the man's eyes and expression suddenly changed to gentleness again. He let go of my collar and said, "I'm sorry, my friends are too hot-tempered. I'll stop them, so please go." Then he continued to
That is not normal. That's not normal. I don't care what nobody says.
mutter to himself, his voice changing every few seconds.
"I'm angry!"
Don't be angry. I'm going to kill that guy.
"No, please don't do that."
"Let's kill him!"
No, just hit him a few times.
"Should I hit him?"
No, you stay still.
I still can't forget the chill running down my spine as I watched the scene in front of me. I was about to leave the arcade when the man suddenly shouted,
Yo, it's like he's being controlled by somebody. Do you peep that?
"Where are you going, you punk? Max keeps crying because of you. Let's play another round of Tekken."
When I turned around in surprise, the man was running towards me with tears in his eyes. I screamed, and the man threw himself at me and swung his fist. I barely managed to avoid it, but he didn't stop. Some of my friends ran over and started fighting with the guy, and I heard someone calling the police. I should have run away then, but I was too young and made a bad call. I was angry and punched him back. He fell back after being hit by my punch, and he seemed to be unconscious for a moment. After a moment, he opened his eyes and started shouting in an unrecognizable language. Then he suddenly jumped at my friend Frank and pushed him. Frank fell back, hitting his head on the game's console and falling to the floor. I could see blood flowing from his head. I was terrified and froze in place. Then the guy suddenly shouted in a woman's voice,
Everyone, please stop. Do you want to go to jail again?
Then he pointed at me again and said in a deep, manly voice,
"We have to kill him. He made Max mad."
Yo, why are you still there, bro? I would have left. Like, for real, bro, I would have been gone.
"Max is still crying."
Then he shouted something in Chinese and looked around wildly. It seemed like he was looking for something. I was scared and stuck next to my friends. Then he shouted again in a deep, manly voice.
"Xia Hao is looking for a knife right now. He said he'll cut you up. This guy used to run a butcher shop. Do you know what I mean?" "There are 7 of us. Do you think you can beat us?"
After a while, the police arrived, and the man's eyes and facial expressions suddenly became softer, and he spoke to the police in a very kind voice. The police looked at the man and said he seemed like a good person, and asked us if he really had been violent, and they had a hard time believing it. However, due to the testimonies of many witnesses, the guy was eventually arrested. I also went to the police station for questioning, and there the guy continued behaving like a nice person in front of the police. I couldn't tell if it was just an act or if the man was being genuine. Anyway, after that day, I never went to the arcade again and stopped playing games completely. And I suffered terrible trauma from the stress of the situation and the guilt of what happened to my friend. What on earth was that man's true identity? Were all of them true?
This is the reason why you cannot trust a lot of people in your life. Yep. Just stay away from random people. Stay away from people who are not normal.
Hi, Wansi. I'm a huge fan of your channel, and I love all of your animated stories. By the way, this incident did not happen to me, but to my grandmother. Recently, my grandma came to live with us, and since then, she has told me a lot of her numerous encounters with the paranormal. This particular encounter happened in 1974 in Anambra State, Nigeria. My grandma was in her late 40s at the time. It was a Saturday when she received a call from the local hospital. A nurse on the phone told her that her daughter, my aunt, who was pregnant, was in labor, and that her presence was needed at the hospital. It was raining out, but it seemed urgent, so my grandma began making her way there quickly. According to her, the hospital was around a 15-minute walk from her house. She was making her way there by foot, and as time went on, the rain only became more and more aggressive. The streets were empty and flooded, and there were no vehicles in sight. My grandma said she was frightened to walk through the flood since it was dangerous, but she also didn't want to abandon her daughter at the hospital. Caught in a dilemma, she stood at the side of the road, not sure of what to do. Then, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a white van came and stopped beside her. She explained that she didn't notice any cars coming, and so she was surprised to see the white van there. Inside the van, there was a man dressed in a uniform, like a security guard uniform. He asked her where she was going, and she told him she needed to be at the hospital down the road. The man told her to get in, and she did. As soon as she got to the hospital, she got out of the van, thanked the man, and began to make her way to the entrance of the hospital. Upon getting there, she met her friend who had also come earlier upon hearing that my aunt was in labor. Her friend was surprised to see her, and she asked her how she got to the hospital through the heavy rain. My grandma told her that someone was kind enough to drop her off. She turned to point toward the street where the van was supposed to be, but to her surprise, the van wasn't there. It was almost like it had vanished into thin air. The strangest part was that my grandma's friend was confused and said she hadn't seen or heard any van. The road was long and straight, so if one were to look down the road at that moment, they should have been able to catch a glimpse of the van driving down the street in the distance. But when my grandma looked, there was no van, nobody. The road was empty, and the rain
That's crazy. Very crazy.
was still pouring. She told me anytime she remembers this event, it sends shivers down her spine. And to this day, she doesn't know who that man was, where the van came from, or why it helped her to get to the hospital on that rainy day.
Alright guys, thank you for watching this with me. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Peace.